Yes, Chairman, we're streaming live again.
Okay, thank you. We continue then with the Boughton application 0840. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Well, this is the latest chapter in the long story of Buckton Fields, and we have an application here before us, an outline application with all matters reserved for a mixed-use development. It's adjacent to the Welford Road in Boughton Parish. The site is part of the Buckton Fields SUE, so it's allocated within the joint core strategy. And this plan here shows the context. So we have the site on the left-hand side. If we move to the right of the overall allocation, we have Buckton Fields East, 376 houses, all built and I think all occupied, bar possibly one. The rest of the site is known as Buckton Fields West, and running through the middle, the wavy blue line is the Spine Road. Everything south of the Spine Road is phase 2 of the SUE. That has a detailed consent for 380 houses and is substantially under construction. The north side of the Spine Road is phase 3. And that is a mix of residential and non-residential uses, including a local centre and the primary school for the site, which was approved in September of last year. So this application before us is for about 3.6 hectares compared with the 50 for the SUE as a whole. The slide before us is showing the indicative master plan, Chairman, for the application. So we have an employment allocation of 1 hectare, which is directly adjacent to the Welford Road. We have a residential area for up to 85 units. And then within that, there are some incidental areas of open space. The site that we're now looking at tonight is part of a site that was consented in 2018 under DA 2011 066. And if we look at that application along with the approval for Buckton Fields East, we presently have for the site a dwelling number of 1,050, or up to 1,050 to be precise. And so that's, if you like, the context for the application. The slide we have here is showing what was previously approved under the 2018 approval in relation to the master plan for the site, as against what we're now looking at for the master plan tonight. So on the right-hand side of the slide, you've got what we've just described as the present application. On the left-hand side of the slide, you can see what the previous master plan proposed for this part of the site. And if I just work from west to east, the previous master plan had a park and ride adjacent to the Welford Road with 500 spaces, car parking spaces. There was an employment area of 1.5 hectares, and then there was a care home shown. The analysis of the proposal, Chairman, starts on page 122 of the agenda. If I just look at the key points, if I may. First of all, in terms of the principle, it's important to note, of course, this is part of an allocated SUE, and it has the benefit of a previous planning permission. There is no policy requirement in the core strategy for a park and ride facility. And Highway Authority do not consider a park and ride here to be necessary to mitigate the impact of this specific development, or indeed the development of Buckton Fields as a whole. Likewise, Chairman, there's no policy requirement for a care home at Buckton Fields. When we go back to the origins of the application approved for the site, the care home was there because of the wishes of the applicant, if you like, rather than being driven by policy. So no policy requirement for a care home. However, given policies in the core strategy and in our own local plan, if this were approved, the reserve matters would need to have regard to how the needs of, amongst other things, older people would be met, but that doesn't have to be met through a care home. There is a policy requirement for employment land, but there is no amount specified. So the fact that it's gone from 1.5 hectares to 1 hectare is not material in policy terms. One of the key changes is that the residential area is a new residential area for Buckton Fields. So we didn't have residential in this area before. We will be having an additional up to 85 dwellings. So that up to 85 dwellings would be additional to the up to 1,050 already approved. I think it's important to say, Chairman, there is no absolute policy objection as to why we should go against that approved figure. The key thing is, would 85 dwellings here work? And could their impact be accommodated satisfactorily? It's important to note that this site is part of a Northampton related development area, so we have to look at the housing land supply in the NRDA rather than our own DDC housing land supply. We do have a 5-year supply in the district as a whole. However, in the NRDA, there is not a 5-year land supply, and so that is a factor that weighs in favour of the proposal and having additional housing. There would be a policy compliant amount of affordable housing, which in the NRDA is 35%. Irrespective of whether 85 houses is acceptable in principle, clearly the detail will always be important, and that would come into play at any reserve matters stage. Part of that would be demonstrating policy compliance in respect of open space provision. At the moment, the indicative master plan shows a deficit as measured against what the local plan policy would require. However, that's a matter that could be addressed in two ways at reserve matters stage. There could be a greater provision of open space, and also there is scope for off-site mitigation, for example, a contribution to allotments through a financial contribution. The conclusions, Chairman, are on page 132 of the agenda, and if I just summarise where officers are going with this. The proposed development does comply with the development plan in all material respects, and there are no material considerations that would indicate otherwise. As I've said, the absence of a 5-year housing land supply in the NRDA would very much weigh in favour of the proposed development. And it's clear from the National Planning Policy Framework, and particularly paragraph 11, but where a 5-year housing land supply can't be demonstrated, then permission should be granted unless any adverse impacts would demonstrably outweigh the benefits. In this case, the benefits are providing housing and employment land, and provided there were appropriate planning conditions and planning obligations as usual, then it's considered that any adverse impacts would be capable of being mitigated, and those will be outweighed by the benefits. So the advice is that the application should be approved. However, there is a requirement for a Section 106 agreement, and the components of that are in the report at page 132. So the advice is that it's a resolution to grant permission subject to the completion of a Section 106 agreement, and subject to the various conditions which are set out in the report, Chairman. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. We have one speaker, and that's Mr. Ed Durant, who's the agent. Over to you, sir.
Thank you for the opportunity to address the Planning Committee. Since the first planning applications for Buckton Fields were approved, it has been successfully delivering new homes for Daventry and Northampton. As the site forms part of the Northampton-related development area, these new homes help maintain the Borough Council's housing land supply position. As this is presently below 5 years, the tilted balance in favour of sustainable development is engaged. The intensification of land at Buckton Fields will further reduce the need for new allocations by making the most efficient use of a site in a demonstrably sustainable location. The site was originally identified to deliver in the region of 1,000 dwellings and associated development in a phased manner. An outline application for the site was submitted in 2011 and improved in 2018. Much has changed both locally and nationally since the 2011 application was submitted. Responding to these changes, this application seeks to maximise the delivery of new homes by replanning this part of the site that was to accommodate the care home, park and ride, and employment. The application proposes up to 85 new homes and a reduced employment site, which will act as a buffer between Welford Road and the new homes and better define the entrance of the site. This reduction is in part responding to the significant shift in home working as a result of the pandemic. The site is no longer being considered for a park and ride site or a care home. It is therefore necessary to accommodate an alternative use that will deliver planning benefits. Councils are required to significantly boost the supply of new homes by making the most efficient use of sites in sustainable locations. The delivery of new homes also brings economic development through the creation of jobs. These benefits are even more critical in light of the recent economic downturn. Buckton Fields has been an important supplier of affordable housing, and 35% of the new homes will be affordable. The local centre and associated uses falling under the new E-use class will be delivered pursuant to conditions attached to the 2011 application. Permitting more homes will help make these commercial facilities more viable and allow for greater internalisation of trips by residents, with the infrastructure already in place to encourage walking and cycling. The figure of 1,000 dwellings has never been a ceiling for development at Buckton Fields. The documents that are submitted in support of this application demonstrate that the additional homes can be delivered without any impacts that cannot be mitigated by planning conditions and Section 106 obligations. Whilst the 2011 application was the subject of multiple objections, this latest application has not generated a significant number of representations. This application proposes to accommodate more homes on a popular site that is in a sustainable location. These new homes will be within walking distance of the primary school, employment, public transport and shops once the local centre is delivered. It will also deliver a better located employment site. All these material planning considerations carry significant weight in the planning balance. It is therefore respectfully requested that members support the officer recommendation and approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Local member who's asked to speak, Councillor Shepherd.
Chairman, thank you very much. It's rare that the Planning Committee gets opportunity to look at the evolution of a development of a site that some years ago it approved. I mean, my first introduction to this site, I recall an officer's briefing when I was a new member in 1984, when Scott Herridge, who was the planning officer then, took me to a map and showed me to this oblong site, which clearly was, in his view, at risk for development. That has been my involvement since that date. There's been some refusals and, as we've heard, recent approvals. So the gestation has been very substantial. Today, there are about 400 dwellings occupied. When I last saw my electoral roll, there were just over 1,500 electors at Buckton Fields. Now, Chairman, each one of those electors bought their house on the basis, amongst other things, of a master plan. The master plan showed park and ride, it showed a care home, it showed a school, it showed sports pitch, it showed community facilities. Now, of those elements, the school is under construction. The park and ride and the care home are proposed to be aborted. The sports bits ain't there yet. And the community facilities, supposedly in the local centre, ain't there yet. There's nothing community facilities wise apart from public open space. And whilst we, as members, know very well the legalities behind all this, and that a planning permission and a master plan does not guarantee anything at all in terms of development. It simply provides what is intended. Residents who bought houses do so on the basis of various things, including, I suggest, the master plan. I just invite members to bear that in mind. As you know, Chairman, my particular concern is not so much with the increase of 85 houses. Originally, we were talking about 1,500 on site. That's going back in the turn of the century. And, you know, goodness me, thank goodness we haven't developed the site. We didn't develop the site then. It is today a very well developed site. The housing quality and construction, I think, is excellent. And the type of development we would have got had this been granted at the original time would have been you know, incomparable. But anyway, the two issues that I've concerned with have very recently been the absence of concrete proposals as to the delivery of any community facilities and any early years provision. Dealing with the community facilities first, they are proposed to be developed, to be provided in the local centre. They're conditioned by one of the previous permissions to be provided in a local centre. The conventional approach for delivery of community facilities and education facilities are that the land should be given to the authority, given to either the parish council or the education school on a peppercorn rent, normally 125 years. That is not proposed in respect of the community facilities at the local centre. We don't know what actually is proposed. It is going to be a commercial entity, because all that's conditioned for community facilities is that it will be delivered in some fashion in the local centre. I have had a vision for community facilities. I've tried to sell it to the parish council. I've failed. Therefore, I have no comment further on the community facilities aspect, save the suggested condition that I've set out and is in with your papers. As far as the early years is concerned, early years is not proposed as a concrete provision anywhere in the development. It's been a mystery to me, absolute mystery, that the local authority, which is the landowner and local education authority and bidder for early years funding, has received in the course of 106 over £2 million. Over £2 million is being given to the LEA for early years. And yet the county council, as owner of the land, responsible for delivering early years, has never had any proposal to use any of its land for early years. And indeed, you know, my pressure in the last couple of years to try and persuade the county council to allocate some land, early years and local centre in return for this extra development has fallen on deaf ears. Anyway, fortunately, I'm able to helpfully, I think, say to members that in recent days, there's been agreement in principle to investigate the possibility of putting early years within the school site itself. Now that is a significant development, which is now being accepted as being possible. And although the ownership of the school site is now, of course, with the school, and ownership of adjacent land, which would need to be involved, is with Bloor Homes and is designated public open space. There is a scheme which is now being actively investigated for delivery of early years within the school site itself. And that is a tremendous relief to me, and it's a great pleasure. And frankly, that deals with, hopefully, with the other condition that I had proposed. Chairman, whilst I've got your ears, these two issues of the absence of community facilities and the absence of early years provision are matters that could have been dealt with by a condition by 106 years ago. I remember at both the occasions where the applications were discussed by your committee in the past, that there was that I had urged members to participate in the 106 drafting. That was resisted, but there we are. That I think always has been an issue. But it is for members to be guardians. Councillor Amos earlier mentioned who monitors these things. Of course, officers monitor conditions, but really it's for members to be guardians of the conditioning and the 106 process with sites on their patch. And it is only through member involvement that now there is the concept of early years being delivered on the primary school site, which until Monday of this week was suggested by the county should be on the employment site. Chairman, I've had a rant on my particular concerns on this site. I've put up 2 conditions as proposals, which I completely understand officers have got concerns about, but generally I leave the matter in your hands. My prime concern on early years has, I would like to think, been satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Making a flippant comment, I could say that your parish council must have a hell of a lot of seal money.
We've got about £250,000 at the moment, uncommitted.
Mind you, I'm a believer that if you're getting the houses, you should get some gain out of it as well. So why not? Right, members. I can see a hand. Councillor Irving Swift.
Yes, I don't know at that late stage how, with the pandemic, we had our wonderful Brampton Valley Way, and I will get on and on about the Brampton Valley Way. The Brampton Valley Way starts at Buxton Field, and nothing has been done for the people who have bought Brampton Valley Way, who have bought in Buxton Field, to have the best facility when you say about sport and pitches and so on. During the pandemic, the Brampton Valley Way was used, I mean, in Brixworth and in where I live. The parkings were always full. It has been a discovery for people, and a lot of people came from Northampton because I asked them where they came from, being nosy Parkers, and I am. Now, I'm sure Councillor Parkers and Councillor Harris will support me. What can we do to make sure that in the section 106 we secure, and I was told that it doesn't have, the Brampton Valley Way is the best way, and the developer is listening. The Brampton Valley Way is the best way for the developer, if he can have a bit of money on section 106 to provide a cycling route. It's a national cycling route, and for people who have young children or people who are disabled, who have wheelchair and so on, that is the best way for them to discover the countryside outside of Northampton. So I am very in favor of the report, and I will propose that we go with officer advice. But I would like section 106, and also, as the developer said, we need to look at older generation. But if I know the patch quite well, I think we have a nursing home, in fact, behind the Windover already. So, but how we can make sure that the new buildings, some are for long-term living and for older people. And again, with the Brampton Valley Way, it's a perfect way for older people to walk because it's flat. So it's my bid from the Brampton Valley Way. Thank you so much. It's my rant. Bye.
Thank you. That's a proposal that the officer's report be approved. Plus, you want some attention to the 106 to encompass the Brampton Valley Way support for it. I must admit, you're brilliant at that. I share your enthusiasm for it. Right, do you have a seconder? There's hands everywhere, but are they hands that want to speak or not?
Chairman, the planning officer would like to come back, I think, before you take a seconder.
Okay, planning officer. Steve?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I don't know whether you want me to do it now. I mean, I'm happy to respond to points that Councillor Shepherd made, and also the specific point that Councillor Irving Swift made about the Section 106 contribution. I can do that now, or I can come back and respond to queries en masse later on if you prefer.
If you can do them, if they don't take all night, you could do them now, I should think, Steve, would be the best.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I've had discussion and correspondence with Councillor Shepherd about the issues that she's raised, and he has a very commendable vision for delivering facilities at Buckton Fields. But I think what we need to separate out are those, I'm going to call them bigger issues, from how we look at the planning application tonight. And in relation to early years, yes, the proposal that's now coming forward for the school site is great news. It will need another planning application, but it's good news. This application, if approved, would provide an early years contribution through a Section 106 agreement. And there's a sense in which we as the planning authority have to make sure we get the contribution. And it's then up to the local education authority, county council at present, of course, who have to determine how that's delivered. In terms of community facilities, yes, there is a condition on the present permission that requires it to be part of the local centre. Part of that condition does require details of the management. So there is control potentially of how that space would be managed. In terms of the Brampton Valley Way, absolutely, it's on the doorstep of this development. I think what we need to look at is, in 106 terms, does this development have an adverse impact on the Brampton Valley Way, rather than simply being a good thing for it? Does it have an adverse impact? If so, how do we address that? Now, one thought with the open space, as I said earlier, is that there's a combination of more on-site open space and some off-site contribution. Now, one aspect of that could be for allotments, but another aspect could, I underline the word could be a contribution to the Brampton Valley Way. That's something that would come out of the negotiation of the 106. But I stress we would need to be able to demonstrate that there was an impact on the Brampton Valley Way from the development, and we would have to identify how that impact could be mitigated, and that would need to then play into the Section 106 agreement. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, now, if I've got them in the right order, I need a seconder for Councillor Irving Swift's proposal after hearing clarification from the planning officer. Do I have a seconder, please? Is that a no then? I can't see any hands, so...
Chairman, Councillor Parker is indicating.
Councillor Parker.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Happy to support that. And I note what Councillor Irving Swift said about the Brampton Valley Way, which is absolutely valid. I understand what Steve is saying as well, but that's going to be right on the doorstep of the beginning of the Brampton Valley Way, right through to Market Harborough. So I would hope there some 106 money, because you can dictate where that goes, should go to that to enhance it from where it is now. So happy to propose Councillor Irving Swift. Thank you, Chair.
You're seconding it. Okay,
I'm
thank
indeed,
you.
Chair.
Right, I'm going to Councillor Wesley, then Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Wesley.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a couple of things really. Just to say, I did lose video contact with you for a little while, but I could hear everything that was going on. So I just want to make the committee aware that I have heard all of the debate. And then just to say, just usual frustration on large developments, the fact that as a planning committee, we vote on the master plans and we see what's we see what's going to be put in place, and then as the years go by, that all changes, and then we're sort of compromised because the principle of development is already there, and then there's various other things come into place, so we're sort of pretty much stymied. So sorry, just my little rant and moan about the long-term large developments. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wesley. Councillor Ritchie.
Thanks, Chair. I originally put up my hand wanting to ask a question that I think the planning officer tried to respond to, which is what has happened to the proposals that Councillor Shepherd made, where on page 103 he proposes, or at least invites consideration of 2 conditions. I got the impression that we were told that actually something was somewhere in the conditions that covered the community facilities. I've just been looking through the conditions and can't actually see anything. I'd just like a little bit more clarification. And if there's not grounds, if they're not already covered, why we can't just include the 2 conditions suggested by Councillor Shepherd in the, add these to the conditions that we already have in the papers here.
I'm sure somebody will answer it.
Yeah,
Steve.
I'll come in, Chairman. Thank you. We're talking about two separate matters here, in a sense. The reference to a condition that concerns community facilities is a condition that is attached to the permission granted under DA/2011/066. So the consent that was granted for Buckton Fields West in 2018 has a condition that requires the community centre or community space to be provided as part of the local centre. So that is a condition that's already in place from a previous permission and remains in place. By contrast, Councillor Shepherd has invited members to consider 2 conditions, which, as Councillor Ritchie says, are set out on page 103 of the report, about halfway down. And those conditions are about early years and about community facilities. And as members will know, conditions have to satisfy tests. And one of those is that they have to be relevant to the particular application. Now, in this case, whilst I understand why Councillor Shepherd wants clarity on these points, they are, to my mind, not matters that are proper planning conditions for this application, which is the key thing. The first of the recommended conditions from Councillor Shepherd is seeking clarity on how early years facilities will be delivered. Now, where our responsibility stops, I would suggest, in the first place, is we have to secure the contributions for early years provision, and thereafter the local education authority has the fundamental responsibility for applying that money in the best way possible. So I don't believe it's for the applicant, as Councillor Shepherd invites, I don't believe it's for the applicant to have to clarify to our satisfaction how that will be delivered. I don't think that's a proper planning condition. And similarly, the second condition that Councillor Shepherd invites committee to consider is about clarifying how the community facilities shall be provided. Well, as I've hopefully explained, I think there is clarity already. There is a specific planning condition on a previous planning consent that requires the reserve matters for the local centre to include community space. And so that detail will have to come forward as part of the reserve matters for the local centre. And so therefore I don't see the condition A to be necessary, or B indeed related to the present application. And just by way of background, Chairman, this is not directly relevant to the application, but I think it's important background because Councillor Shepherd has expressed concern, understandably, about delay in delivering facilities. The County Council has been going through a process of disposing of its land at Buckton Fields, the Phase 3 land. There is, I understand, a preferred bidder in place, and that preferred bidder will presumably be bringing forward the balance of the site, i.e. Phase 3, excuse me, part of which is the local centre. So clearly there is movement in terms of how the development is progressing, and specifically how Phase 3 is progressing, including the local centre. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. I'll try and be as brief as I can. And obviously, as a representative of Brixworth, of course, would completely endorse the comments made by Councillor Irving Swift in regard to the Brampton Valley Way. The lockdown periods have significantly increased traffic, which is good and to be encouraged because it means people are getting out in the countryside. And I think there is more that can be done to potentially make it a more sustainable, more permanent commuting route, potentially even by cycling. So I think anything that can be explored in that area would be worthy. And also just want to reiterate the points made, in fact, by Councillor Shepherd earlier on. We have no way of knowing, I guess, how much the master plan played into people's buying into this scheme and making decisions to move there in the first place. And it does seem to be a consistent pattern, unfortunately, that facilities are always the last thing to arrive. And, you know, I understand completely the commercial reasons for it, I'm sure, but we want people to learn their habits early. And again, it's probably a bit of a rant. It would be much more sensible for developers to build them early, to build good habits for people to use the facilities whilst they're there on site, rather than waiting until everything else is done, when perhaps people have got to relearn their habits to now start using facilities. So I end my rant there too. Thank you.
It's called Wonderland where that happens. Councillor Ritchie again.
Thank you. Briefly, I'm totally with Councillor Harris on what he has just suggested. But why I put my hand up again is we're told that, you know, it is our job that the conditions on this application will provide the funds. But it's not up to the applicant, we're told, to actually decide how these funds will be used to provide early years provision. The applicant's the county council. It's the county council's job. I just feel that this is a nonsense. I just feel that we should be applying a lot more pressure so that we satisfy these issues that have been raised. That if there is a promise of services, we don't simply wait in hope that the services will come years after the state has been built. But we need to have an assurance about when these services are going to arrive and what they're going to look like.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Well, I've got the badge that says County Council. You can have one if you like. Oh dear. Right, any more speakers, please? Oh, Councillor Frost.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just a quick one, building on that one. We're told that we need to grant permission in order to release the funds. I don't understand why, when interest rates are so low, why does it have to be done that way? Why can't, if these are important facilities, these important community facilities, why can't the applicant borrow the money to build them? Why does it have to be done this way around?
Well, it's a normal way it is done. Steve?
Yes, Chairman. First, can I just respond to Councillor Ritchie's last comment? I mean, yes, the applicant is the County Council, but I think one has to say that there are different parts of the County Council in the way that there are different parts of DDC. And so, yes, the applicant is the County Council, it owns the land, but also there is NCC as local education authority. And with any planning application, and we need to set aside, in a sense, the applicant. With any planning application, a 106 needs to deliver, amongst other things, money for education, and the local authority, sorry, the local education authority has a responsibility to then decide how that is best spent. In terms of Councillor Frost's point, I'm not sure we should comment on if you like, on the funding point and whether the applicant should borrow money to provide facilities. The master plan is there. The primary school is happening. As I've said, the phase 3 facilities are now likely to come forward because there is a preferred bidder for the land. So I think things are happening now. Perhaps I'll just go back to some earlier comments about, we have a change in the master plan here and people bought houses at Buckton Fields based upon the previous master plan. Well, as one councillor said, we don't know whether that was true or not, to what extent, people bought into Buckton Fields because of the master plan. But in a sense, I think we have to set that aside. We have to say to ourselves, if you take Buckton Fields as a whole, and if you look particularly at the present application and what it delivers, is that acceptable? It's not whether what the present master plan proposes is better or worse than what went before, but is what is presently proposed acceptable in itself. And officer's view, Chairman, clearly is that what's proposed is acceptable, notwithstanding how it might differ from what went before. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. Now I think we're to the point of a vote on this, because it is getting rather late. Not necessarily a reason to go to a vote, but I think we will do. We have a proposal that the application be approved as per officer's advice, with a little sort of added on, look out for the 106 part for the Brampton Valley Way. We love the Brampton Valley Way. Do not let it go, and everything like that. I can see Councillor Irving Swift likes that one. That's been seconded. So all those in favour, please tell Jevley now.
Councillor Chandler.
For.
Councillor Cribbin.
For.
Councillor Dabbs.
For.
Councillor Frost.
Against.
Councillor Harris.
For.
Councillor Irving Swift.
For, and very happy for the Brampton Valley Way.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Matton.
I missed the beginning of the presentation, so it's only right that I abstain.
Okay. Councillor Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Robertson.
For.
Councillor Wesley.
For.
And Councillor Osborne.
For. The count.
11 in favour, 1 abstention and 1 against.
Okay, the application is approved with the addition of the I Love You 106 Brampton Way.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I finally repeat on the public record my thanks for Steve and respect for Steve Ellis in the sometimes difficult issues that we've been facing in Buckton Fields over the years. This is, I suspect, his last contribution to the Buckton Fields debate, and the development of the site has been enhanced by his work over the years.
Thank you, Steve.
Chairman,
I'm sure we all
thank you very
support
much.
that. Yeah. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Right, we go to the, thank goodness, the very last item on the agenda. Presumably this is from you, Tony. You're presenting the report, are you?
No, Chairman, we've got a couple of applications to go through before we get to the
we haven't,
last
have we?
report. Yes.
Oh gosh. Okay, over to you.
This
Planning Officer.
This is the site for Brixworth, DA 2020-0948 for the change of use of land to garden land. Members may recall this site or a similar scheme further down the road over here, where there was a change of use of a buffer strip, which David Wilson, the original developer of the scheme or now owner of the site, got permission to use it as a garden area. You still got the buffer area of the highway before the with the A508. So it's this piece of land which they are seeking to change the use of into residential. So this is the view of the garden, and that's the rear of the property itself. And again, it's the corner to be enclosed. So you can see the shrubs to be removed. As you can see, it hasn't been really looked after, but overall we consider it as acceptable. We have consulted our ecologist, and they've got no objections to the proposal, subject to the imposition of conditions, especially about hedgehogs. Also, our environmental health have got no objections due to the removal of this area due to noise and disturbance from the A508. Overall, it's considered to be acceptable and it's recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Catherine. I expect a straightforward proposal and a seconder and a vote here, because it's just like one we had very, very recently. Right, Councillor, local person. Councillor Parker?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just as you said, there are two buffer zones here. One is in the ownership of Northampton County Council, and that will still remain. The officer states, given that there is additional line of screening in the form of the planted highway verge under NNC ownership, there is no breach of screening along the bypass. This application is the same as the previous application, or heard by the committee and approved in 2019. So I cannot see any reason why I would actually go against officers' advice. And I propose that we go with officers' advice and approve.
Thank you. Hopefully the other member will second it. Councillor Harris?
Yes, happy to second that. I'm glad to see some conditions relating to wildlife. Other than that, happy to second.
Thank you. Just goes to show we've got two sensible members for representing Britsworth. Right, there's no debate, is there? No. God, surprising. So all those in favour of approving the application, please tell Jeverley.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Chartler?
For.
Councillor Cribbin?
For.
Councillor Dabbs?
For.
Councillor Frost?
For.
Councillor Harris?
For.
Councillor Irving Swift?
For.
Councillor James? Councillor Matton?
For.
Councillor Parker?
For.
Councillor Ritchie?
Abstain.
Councillor Robertson?
For.
Councillor Wesley?
For.
Councillor Osborne?
For.
$12 in favour, 1 abstention.
Right, the application is approved. Right. The next one is for the enforcement one. I have got it right this time.
No.
No?
No, Chairman, there's one more application.
Oh dear. Oh, that's twice I've done that. Right, what village are we in?
Thanks, Chairman.
West Haddon, Chairman, it's page 144 of the papers.
Yeah, I should know my own village, shouldn't I? Huh. Yes, it's the big house on the outskirts of West Haddon, yeah. Okay. 144?
Yeah. Yeah, page 144, Chairman.
Okay. Over to you, planning officer.
As you just alluded, Chairman, this is a big house outside of the village, and basically it's on a big plot, and they're proposing a 2-storey rear extension. And it's, despite the concerns of the parish council, there's no adverse impact on the wider landscape, immediate landscape, or indeed any neighbouring properties, if there were any. We're recommending the application be approved, Chairman. No further comment.
Oh, you were so quick then, Eamon. I like that.
I like just moving along, Chairman.
Well, local member, I'm quite happy with it. So I am a local member. We haven't got any speakers on it. I would prefer not to make the proposal from the chair, so I'll let members speak on it. Councillor Irving Swift.
I propose we go with officer advice. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder?
I'll second it, Chair.
Councillor Robertson. Thank you. You wish to say anything?
No, thank you, Chair. We've discussed it at parish and there was no particular comment.
Thank you. Right, we have a proposal the application be approved as per officer's advice, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please tell Jevley in a minute.
Okay, Councillor Chartler.
For.
Councillor Cribbin.
For.
Councillor Dabbs.
For.
Councillor Frost.
For.
Councillor Harris.
For.
Councillor Irving-Swift.
For.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Matton.
For.
Councillor Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Robertson.
For.
Councillor Wesley.
For.
And Councillor Osborne.
For.
That's unanimous.
Right, this time we can get to the enforcement one. I've been trying to, as it's the last one. Right, over to you, officer.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just show you the PowerPoint presentation. So this is an enforcement report for Newnham Turn Farm in Doddford. Members should be aware of this site. It has been subject to a number of enforcement investigations over the years, some of which are actually immune from planning. However, there is a mobile home stroke caravan, which was subject, as you can see in this picture here, which was subject to a lawful development certificate towards the late last year, which was determined last month. Which was refused because it's considered on the balance of profitabilities. It has not been used for a period of 10 years, or they couldn't claim immunity. So hence why this enforcement report is before members tonight. As you can see, there's a public pride away here, which means the site is visible from public vantage points. It's within the open countryside where we don't normally allow new residential properties unless they adhere to certain criteria, which this site or this proposal is not. So in planning terms, we consider it unacceptable in that terms. So as you can see, these are the timeline of the key events, which is a summary. So a number of visits made by our planning enforcement officers, and it was deemed that there was no residential occupation at that time. It was only in 2018 when it was occupied, where enforcement officers negotiated discussion or had ongoing discussions with the owner. Therefore then the lawful development certificate was submitted. So these are the pictures of the site, so you can clearly see that this site is now being used as residential. So it's not just the removal of the mobile home caravan from the site, but also the residential paraphernalia as well, through the change of use of the land. So these are the photos. So this is a generator within an outbuilding. So you can clearly see within the building, or within the mobile home, should I say, it's not a building, that it's clearly being used for residential purposes. So the advice is the residential is used in the open countryside is contrary to development plan policies. And it's now expedient and proportionate to pursue formal enforcement action following the refusal of the lawful development certificate. And the enforcement notice which will to be issued will be required the removal of the mobile home and associated structures to secure the cessation of the residential use, which is currently unauthorised. Now, in any enforcement notices, the notice doesn't take effect until 28 days after serving it. So this will allow the owner of the land to actually potentially appeal against the decision. So any enforcement action will not be undertaken until we know whether it's done or not. But in this case, it's likely that we give them 9 months for compliance, but obviously that will be subject to potentially a process ongoing if the owner decides to appeal against this notice, or the lawful development certificate, and we would have to wait for the outcome of that appeal. So hence why we're recommending enforcement action at this stage. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Catherine. Got two speakers wish to speak. A member of the committee, which will be Councillor Smith, and then Councillor Brown has requested to speak. So, Councillor Smith, you go first.
Chairman, Councillor Smith's had to leave the meeting, unfortunately, so he's
Well,
no longer here.
He's got wide shoulders then, Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Yeah, I'd just like to say that the proposed enforcement action as recommended by officers has the full support of local ward members, and it's unfortunate that Councillor Smith and particularly Councillor Amos haven't been able to see it through to this point in the meeting. I'd particularly like to commend Councillor Amos, who has been banging the drum on this issue for the full 6 years that he's been a councillor at Daventry District Council. And I think the length of this long-running issue is perhaps highlighted by the fact that within the report, it stated that certain aspects are likely to be immune from action by time limits under the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. That is to say that because certain issues have failed to be acted upon for over 4 years, this authority is now time barred from taking what may otherwise have been considered to be appropriate action. That is the source of considerable embarrassment to local members, particularly Councillor Amos, who has contributed many years of hard work in trying to bring this issue to the attention of officers in a timely fashion. Also for members of the public who have worked very hard to provide evidence and to alert officers of the council to ongoing issues on the site. But we are where we are, and I hope that members will support the action being proposed tonight. I do just have one further element of concern, or a question rather, to raise of officers. The report states that on balance, there was no evidence of the mobile home being occupied. I think that's referring to 2017, when one set of investigations was deemed to have been concluded. I'd just like to clarify how it's possible for there to be no evidence on balance. Surely there was either no evidence or there was insufficient evidence on balance. It seems to be an oxymoronic statement, and I'd like a clarification as to what evidence was found of the home either being occupied or unoccupied, what consideration was given to such evidence, and why action wasn't able to be taken sooner to prevent this long-running dispute from getting to the point where it has now, in that we're now time barred from taking other action that may have been appropriate. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any quick answer to that, Catherine?
It's really, to be honest, I do not know sort of what evidence there was on site in that 2017. All I can go on is sort of the information which we've got before us, which pretty much states that on balance, and the information that we had at the time through going on site and having investigation, that there was not a permanent residential use going on within that structure, within that mobile home stroke caravan. So hence why it was deemed that there was no breach in plumbing at that stage, or no residential use ongoing. But obviously we have considered it and have continued to monitor the site and pursued, and therefore we are where we are in the sense of recommending an enforcement action on this particular site presently.
Thank you. I think, Councillor Brown, it is possible, very possible, that applicants can make things look completely different to what they are, should they want to, and should they know somebody's coming. So anyway, we'll leave it like that. Councillor Irving-Swift.
Yes, I would like to go with officer report, but also because officer cannot defend themselves. I think Councillor Brown was a bit harsh in his tone. I can say that because he's a councillor like me. Enforcement, when you have been so long, like we have on the planning committee, the planning law is permissive, and to have an enforcement, it has to be measured. And from time to time, us as councillor, we feel very, very disgruntled because we cannot. But for officers to have an enforcement, they have to make sure they have exactly everything their duck in the right online. So as far as I'm concerned, I am always pleased that we see enforcement, because that proves that members of the public have given some evidence and so on, that officers were able to go on site, because we have a small team and sometimes they cannot know if something has gone. So it's a great work, and let's do it. So I propose we go with officer advice. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And I've got a hand up. I presume that you're seconding, Councillor Robertson.
Certainly, I would like to second that.
You'd like to say anything? No.
No, there's nothing more to be said. I support the action.
Okay, thank you. If there are no other speakers, and there doesn't appear to be any, we'll go straight to the vote then. We have a proposal that the council take the action necessarily as per the report, which has been seconded. All those in favour, please charge heavily.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Chartler.
For.
Councillor Cribbin.
For.
Councillor Dabbs.
For.
Councillor Frost.
For.
Councillor Harris.
For.
Councillor Irving Swift.
For.
Councillor James.
For.
Councillor Matton.
For.
Councillor Parker.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Robertson.
For.
Councillor Wesley.
For.
And Councillor Osborne.
For.
That's unanimous.
Thank you. The application, well, it isn't an application. The officers' advice is approved to take action by this committee. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I say thank God that concludes the committee tonight. I am sorry it's taken so long. If it's been partly me, it's partly me, but it's partly the application